When you think of groundbreaking technology, you probably picture silicon chips, maybe satellites, right? But what if I told you that one of the most revolutionary pieces of tech in all of human history was, well, a lump of mud and a sharpened reed? We're going to dive into this because we're talking about cuneiform, the world's very first system of writing. And believe me, it absolutely changed everything. This line, wow. It comes from the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest stories we've ever found. It's this incredibly deep thought on life, death, and what it means to be human. It's like a message in a bottle from our most distant ancestors, speaking directly to us across thousands of years. I mean, that makes you wonder, right? How is it possible that we have a direct link to the minds of people who lived in a world so different from our own? Well, the answer lies in those super simple materials, clay and reeds. And today, we're going to see exactly how they came together to give humanity its voice. So here's our roadmap. First, we'll look at the invention itself. Then we'll see how it was used in just regular, everyday life. After that, we'll get into the epic stories and laws it saved for us. And finally, we'll figure out how these ancient records actually survived all the way into the digital age.
All right, section 1. So, where did this all begin? We have to go back to ancient Mesopotamia, to the Sumerians, who came up with this incredible way to make a permanent record of their world. The name cuneiform is actually a huge clue. It literally means wedge-shaped, and that tells you pretty much everything you need to know about how it worked. This wasn't about writing with ink, it was about pressing shapes into a surface.
The whole process was just genius in its simplicity. You take some wet clay, which, was everywhere in Mesopotamia. You grab a reed from the riverbank, cut the tip into a point. Then you just press that tip into the clay. Different combinations of these little wedge marks made up all the symbols. When you were done, you could just leave the tablet out in the sun to dry. Or for a really permanent record, you'd bake it in a kiln. But here's where cuneiform's real power came from. Its evolution. You see, it started out as simple pictures. A little drawing of a sheep just meant sheep. But the real game changer, the big leap, was when it became a syllabic script. The symbols started standing for sounds. All of a sudden, you could write down anything you could say. Not just sheep, but my sheep are hungry, or even abstract ideas like justice or love. So you've got this powerful new technology. What do you do with it? You might be imagining kings writing down their great victories, or priests recording secret hymns. But its most common use was way more relatable than that. That's right. The first thing people really wanted to write down was who owed what to whom. The huge majority of the earliest cuneiform tablets we have are basically ancient spreadsheets and receipts. They were keeping track of grain, recording payments, and managing goods and services. Just look at this comparison. On the left, you've got a 4,000-year-old record of some transaction. On the right, a modern digital receipt. The technology is worlds apart, obviously, but the human need, it's exactly the same, keeping track of our stuff. And these tablets give us these incredibly specific details about their lives. We actually know that around 2000 BC, a day laborer might earn about 60 sela of barley for a month of work. A sela was a little less than a quart. This wasn't some abstract number. This was their paycheck pressed right into a piece of clay. And of course, if you have writing, you're gonna need schools. Young scribes, mostly boys from wealthy families, trained in special schools called an iduba. And here's a cool detail. Their practice tablets were usually round, so nobody would mistake their homework for an official square or rectangular record. The teacher would write a lesson on one side, and the student would flip it over and try to copy it on the back. Then they'd just smooth the clay over and start again. All right, section 3. So once you've figured out how to record wages and school lessons, you can start recording much bigger things. The kinds of things that actually define a whole culture. Its laws, its beliefs, and its greatest stories. Almost everybody has heard about the Code of Hammurabi in school, right? An eye for an eye. But what if I told you he wasn't the first one to come up with the idea of writing down laws? Not by a long shot. These cuneiform tablets reveal a legal tradition that's way older. Get this. A king named Ur-Nammu of Ur wrote his legal code a full 300 years before Hammurabi was even on the scene. We are looking at the oldest surviving law code in human history, all because it was preserved on a piece of clay. So, what was this ancient justice actually like?
The laws followed this really clear if-then logic. And what's so fascinating is that unlike Hammurabi's famous eye for an eye, Ur-Nammu's code often just prescribed monetary fines. So if you knock out someone's tooth, you don't lose one of your own, you have to pay 2 shekels of silver.
And the intro to the code lays out this incredible principle of justice. Its purpose was to protect the weak from the strong. This isn't just some dry list of rules. It's a society's statement of its values, spoken to us directly from 4,000 years ago.
So we have all these amazing tablets. But this brings up a really practical question. How on earth did they even survive to be rediscovered in the first place?
Seriously, think about that. We just learned that student homework tablets were just sun-dried so they could be wiped clean and used again. That's basically just a hard mud pie. How does a mud pie last for 4,000 years buried under the ground? Well, when archaeologists in the 19th and early 20th centuries started finding these huge libraries of tablets, they had a massive problem. The tablets that were never fired were damp and just unbelievably fragile. Exposing them to the air could make them disintegrate into nothing. They were literally watching history turn to dust right in front of their eyes.
Their solution was actually pretty ingenious. They just finished the job the Sumerians had started thousands of years earlier. They developed techniques to carefully excavate the tablets and then bake them in special kilns, just like pottery. This firing process hardened the clay and preserved those precious inscriptions forever.
And that amazing preservation work is still going on today. But now, it's digital. Projects like the Cuneiform Digital Library Initiative are creating these super high-resolution scans of tablets from museums all over the world and putting them online for free. They're making these ancient voices accessible to anyone, anywhere with an internet connection. So you see, from the most boring receipt to the most profound epic poem, these cuneiform tablets captured the entire spectrum of human life. They aren't just dusty artifacts. They're a direct, unfiltered connection to our shared ancestors. They show us people worrying about their jobs, trying to create a just society, and wrestling with the biggest questions of life and death. And that leaves us with one last kind of big thought. Their simple technology of pressing marks into mud has lasted for millennia. We've taken great care to preserve and digitize it. But what about our records, our emails, our photos, all our data stored on servers and in clouds? What, if anything, would be left of our world for someone to read in another 4,000 years?